Hello, Mr. Suresh. Are you
Hi,
there?
yes, I'm very much here. As I thought you guys were continuing on your
No, I
previous
was
session.
sitting
I
and I
know.
was writing to you.
Yeah, I didn't see. I just
So,
saw your
ma'am, can
WhatsApp
I?
message, and I was on the screen. So,
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Can I introduce
Yes,
Mr.
yes, yes,
Suresh
yes.
Krishna to the assembly?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Suresh Krishna is the co-founder and CEO of Yunus Social Business Fund, Bengaluru, and co-founder and partner of Yunus Social Business India initiative. Prior to this, he was at the helm of affairs at Grameen Kuta since its inception in 1999 as a managing director. He was instrumental in developing Grameen Kuta in a large socially responsible MFI having its outreach in 5 states of India. He has co-founded the Microfinance Industry Associations, namely Microfinance Institutions Network and Association of Karnataka Microfinance Institutions. He has played a very active role in developing the microfinance sector in India. He has also co-founded Grameen Affordable Shelters Private Limited, a company which develops affordable housing for the low-income households along, along with Mrs. Vinitha M. Reddy, founder of Grameen Kuta. He is the managing trustee of Navya Disha Trust, an NGO working to improve water, sanitation, financial literacy, and supplementary education for school children. He currently serves on the board of Bina Artha, an MFI in Indonesia, Mifos.org in USA, an open source core banking software for financial services, SAS Healthcare Private Limited, an affordable healthcare company for the low-income households. Mr. Suresh is a regular speaker and presenter at various national and international forums. He is passionate about agriculture, social businesses, including microfinancing, financial literacy, client education, renewable energy, waste management, healthcare, and livelihoods for the poor. So with these words, I welcome you on behalf of Atal FDP, VESIM, to you, sir, and now over to you.
thank you very much for that nice introduction. We have about 1 hour time, if I'm right, correct, madam?
Yes, sir, you have until 5 o'clock.
Up to 5 o'clock. Okay, so we have about 1 hour, 10 minutes. So what we will do is probably we'll split the presentation into about 45 minutes and then about half an hour for the Q&A. So I would urge you all, all the participants to actually make some questions if you want, because I'm a practitioner, I'm not an academician like you all. So probably whatever I say is from my practical experience of more than a couple of decades now working with the rural households and with the social enterprises for so many years.
You
So,
know, sir, even the new education policy is recommending that we should have a blend of practitioner and academicians.
okay, thank you. So for me, yes, I actually, one of some time back, some other was talking to me, like, you know, in theory, you have a difference between theory and practice, but in practice, you don't have a difference between theory and practice. You just practice that. So, um, so I think for us, for a practitioner per se, I think whatever we have learned is by doing it, and we kind of know what works, when what works, and when what doesn't work. That's what has been our experience. So I would like to use a small presentation to communicate what I wanted to tell you. Can I share the screen?
Yes, sir, I think you have right. Yeah.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
You're seeing the presentation funding aspects of social enterprises?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's perfect. So just to so my presentation has a couple of parts of this, based on what my understanding of social enterprises has been, and what we do as a Yunus Social Business Fund, and then what are the different funding aspects, what one can look at for social enterprises. This is how I'm dividing my entire presentation for you now. So like I was introduced, I mean, I stumbled into the development field about a couple of decades back. Uh, I used to work with an NGO which was into self-help groups for women and then informal education for the school droppers and so on. Later on, microfinance came in as an accident. That's how we stumbled into microfinance, mostly into the model which was developed by the Nobel laureate Professor Mohammed Yunus. I'm sure you guys all heard him at the inaugural speech, which he's now today talking about no going back. I'm hoping that the world will also look at not reset everything and start back the old way, but I'm hoping that we'll make amendments to the way we are actually functioning as a society and the world. So that's 2 decades back when we started off with the model of the Grameen Bank, which was developed by Dr. Yunus, the microfinance model, which we adapted to Indian conditions, mostly the south of India. We started off in and around Bangalore, and then now today it is catering to almost about 20 states in the country and reaching to about 40. In 2015 and 2017, I stepped out of the board. And 2018, this company went and got itself listed on the stock exchange. It's called Credit Access Grameen as a NBFC MFI. That was my pedigree. During this entire period of almost 2 decades when we worked in microfinance and working with the poor households. So the poor households not only require financial services, that is, even though that is what we were doing it, but my experience was that they require a lot more services. Finance is important, but it is not a complete solution to help the poor households. So they require various other solutions. As example is education, healthcare, skill development, jobs, and so on and forth. We were trying to do many things at that time, but then we realized that as one institutions, we can't do everything in under one umbrella or one roof. And it requires dedicated, specialized institutions to do different kind of development activities. So we decided that as a part of microfinance, we will develop microfinance institutions. We'll develop as a microfinance institution, providing financial services to the poor households. But we will work with other institutions where they provide services to the development of the people. When I started, we did not really know what these terms of social enterprises, social businesses, and everything was. We all were trying to do this we thought this is the right thing to do, and that's how we did it. We did not plan for whether we should be a social enterprise, whether it should be a business, whether it should be a commercial business, or as a charitable activity. Those are not which we actually thought about. We were just doing it because we were passionate to go and solve the problem which we thought it is solvable. And we also thought we have a solution to that. That's how we started. Later on, then we realized then all these terms started coming as social enterprises and social businesses and impact businesses and not-for-profit entities and so on. That's how we stumbled into that. So that's what I would like to present my experience based on that. So I'm sure you all understand these different kinds of enterprises. An enterprise can be a regular commercial business. Just give me 1 second, please. Sorry, there was some noise in the background. I thought that would catch up because in our office they do watering of the plants and a lot of noise of water falling around the speaker close by. So coming back to my presentation, I think we know, I mean, all these businesses which are there. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So uh, we all know businesses are there set up as corporates or small businesses. We have MSMEs, you have SMEs, you have large businesses and super large businesses and Fortune 500 companies and all. These are traditional corporations and traditional businesses which are oriented to generate profit to its own stakeholders, or most particularly the shareholders of the company. Then you have on the other side, we have pure NGOs and which are charitable in nature, which do depend on these for-profit entities for funding so that they can provide some development services. Either they depend on companies as under the CSR or the governments or some philanthropists to actually carry out their activities. These are two extreme kinds of entities. One is self-sustaining by itself, which is looking at pure financial value increase for the for the stakeholders or the shareholder. And then we have pure charitable entities which are looking at generating only social value. Here, most of these charitable entities, the biggest challenge with NGOs has been funding and their sustainability. They are their sustainability is driven by the what happens with the donors side, with the donors which are funding and these charitable institutions completely comes to a standstill. Most of the time, they will not know whether how to build their organizations for development. So development cannot be a part-time activity according to me. Development is a full-time business in itself. Hence, there should be a little bit of long-term perspective of that, which is a little difficult in the charitable entities, because if you look at majority of the funding which comes into the from CSR or donors, maybe either mostly it is 1 year horizon is what they get, or maybe sometimes they might get 3 years. Very few projects do get about 5 years to 10 years and so on. But in between we have what is these called the hybrid institutions, which we call it as social enterprises, which takes the best of the both worlds, which is social at heart and has a financial engine which is going to be which is sustainable, which is designed on sustainability and efficiencies and runs as a business. So this is what the social enterprises necessarily has to be. But if you look at the way social enterprises, the term being used in the market, it's slightly confusing. People, I think we all sometimes confuse between anything is an enterprise, whether it is a social or traditional. So that's where social enterprises have a little bit of confusion in the way its definition is. So, and also it is not just in black and white, like the picture what you're seeing. It's a kind of shades of various colors, various kind of designs it comes. In fact, world over, there are different rules for social enterprises or social businesses. Some can do business-like functions, but in India, we can't do any business-like activity, because the moment we start doing any generating any revenue in a social enterprise, I think the income tax will come and tax it, and we will no longer be a social enterprise. But just a quick look at different kinds of organizational structures which social enterprises might get themselves structured. There are these non-governmental organizations which are usually trusts in society. We might have not-for-profit companies which are either say registered under Section 8 companies, and we do have for-profit social enterprises. When I say for-profit social enterprises, they are structured as for-profit companies. They are not registered as not-for-profit. That's what I meant in that. And we have what is called social businesses, which I will talk about it slightly later about social businesses, which I'm sure you heard from Dr. Yunus, and I would like to delve a little bit more deeper into that. So in India, I think the whole social enterprises are generally supported by the impact funds. When I'm talking about social enterprises here, I'm talking specifically about those enterprises which are not charitable in nature, but these are enterprises which have a business model which is going to self-sustain itself. That means they generate revenues from the services which they provide to the clients, unlike charitable entities where yeah, I mean, institutions generate revenue from a donor and they provide service to somebody else. Here, the social enterprises generate revenue from the customer itself. They all require investments, right? I mean, they require funds to flow in. So in the last decade, according to the impact investment report, there is a need in India about 43 lakh crores on an annual basis to actually, if we have to meet our SDG targets. But this is usually assuming that these are all impact businesses which can actually do that. So if we have to do that, one of the things which is in the last 10 years, if you look at, we have got only supply of about 80,000 crores in the last 10 years. So that's a very minuscule compared to what the requirement is. Even though the impact investing landscape in India has been growing at the rate of 20% year on year, but it is still in its infancy. Amongst all the impact investment funds, majority of them, roughly about 76%, was invested as equity into social enterprises and about 24% in debt. This is what been the fund flows so far. In the initial years, I think microfinance institutions and financial services have actually been the bulk consumers of all these impact funds because the decade what we passed 2010 to 2020 is where I think we had a boom in the microfinance industry, and then microfinance industry grew at breakneck speeds, covering all corners of the country and reaching to all the poor households. I think I was if I'm right, I think microfinance institutions reach out to about 6 crore households with microfinance so far, which is almost, if you take average 5 people as in one household. So we are talking about 30 crore people being reached, which is almost, let's say, about 1/4 of our country's populations provided by microfinance today. So there are different kinds of funding which social enterprises do have. At different stages, you require different kinds of funding. There are different players in this market. I'm sure many of you might know this already. I'm sure, I think most know that if somebody wants a little money, the first people whom we can fall back on are actually friends and family. That's how most people start enterprises or businesses in India. And then slowly they move to some angel investors who might be providing seed funding, and move towards impact funds or kind of venture capital funds as they move as they start growing their businesses from seed to early stage to growth stage. Mostly predominantly private equity and bank loans you will start seeing in the businesses only at a growth stage. In fact, my own example is when we started off, when we started microfinance way back in late 1990s, we got seed capital funding from Grameen Trust. That was neither of, it was not from a commercial source. It was kind of an angel investment which we got. That is what started helping us. In fact, our private equity started coming in only after we were at a significant scale and we were poised to the growth. Until then, our funding was only big from the venture, I mean, impact funds itself. So that's kind of funding which we will we will kind of we will have funding requirements in different at different stages, and different players will actually provide funds at different stages of the growth of the institutions. So mostly when I talked about equity or the funding for this thing, there are predominantly three kinds of funding which comes in. Each one has its own merits and demerits. In fact, equity is very important because that is what it provides risk coverage for the enterprise. And usually, initially, the equity comes in from the entrepreneur himself, and slowly to the angels and friends and family angels, and then other investors do come in. But equity is not a solution for all the needs of the enterprise as it grows, because equity dilutes ownership. It has advantage that it just stays in the enterprise for a certain definitive period of time, which is what any enterprise requires. As you know, the equity and the funds need to be in the enterprise, whereas debt is kind of flies in and flies out of the enterprise. So it is not necessarily right instrument for supporting the growth of the businesses. And whether it is business, when I'm talking about business, it is commercial or social enterprise, there is no difference. The only difference with social enterprise is what do we do once there is some residual wealth accumulated in those enterprises. We'll talk about it slightly later, but I think for us, equity, what I have seen is usually it comes to about investment horizons of 5 to 10 years. And usually the sweet spot would be around 7 years. And the early equity investors will start putting pressure around 7 years to actually start exiting. But that's is very important. Debt is usually, so any enterprise, I mean, social enterprises use it for either working capital or sometimes capital needs. But here the debt starts flowing in only if there is some predictable cash flows. Grants are also available, but there's a very hard to come. In my own enterprise, I can tell you probably maybe in the initial, until we got the main commercial funding start flowing in, maybe up to that time we would have got about 1 or 2% of our requirements in the form of grants. But when we talk about that, I mean, that's very essential. It comes in the right time to actually help stabilize or start covering up some of the losses which we would have incurred, or where our revenues shortfall will be there in the enterprise that time. So a little bit of dwelling a little bit into the equity. I just want to spend time on equity. Equity comes in various sizes and various times in the life of an enterprise. What fascinates most of the entrepreneurs is as they raise more and more equity. I mean, like you say, from a seed round, they call it, I mean, they're fancy names like seed round, Series A, Series B, and the Series D, and so on. And then you go to the IPO for when somebody needs a large amount of funding. It's very exciting for an entrepreneur to go through this journey of raising more and more equity from different sources and different kinds of equity, in fact. But one thing one needs to look at is, I know why, I mean, just before that, I know if you look at why it's very exciting is because as one raises equity at different stages from Series A to Series B to so on, every time the value of the company is discovered here. Investors come and discover and tell us and tell the world what is the worth of this enterprise. So as an entrepreneur, what more can be fascinating? Somebody is putting a value for a work which he never thought about it so much of value. So the valuation starts growing from 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, and so on and forth. When I was just looking at some data a couple of days back, I saw microfinance institutions which is supposed to be serving only the poor. You will find the equity multipliers or the valuation matrices ranging anywhere between 1.8 book value to about 6 times the book value. What caught my eye is the more and more, in fact, it's my personal experience too, when somebody raises money at higher valuation, there is a higher expectation from the investors for higher returns. So there were companies which I have seen myself, including my own company. We might have got a valuation about 2 or 2.5. There are companies got valuation of 4 and 5. We felt sometimes bad, and we are doing much better, and somebody is getting a much higher value than us. Why is this happening? Then we realized that the people who got higher valuation were actually put under tremendous pressure to actually deliver that kind of returns. So they forgot what the social purpose which they started off as. They started running behind the money and the valuations. So higher the valuation, honestly, I tell you, irrespective of whether it's a social enterprise or commercial enterprise, the higher the expectation the investors will have. So one needs to be very, very cognizant about it. There is nothing right or wrong here. If somebody paid 5x valuation, of course, they need to get out at the same valuation or much more than that. That's a very simple understanding. But that is what puts the institution under pressure. But whoever enterprise who is taking such kind of money need to understand this and move on. Some of these investors who come in, Angel investors are a little bit more flexible, and they come at very early stage in the enterprises. We have the Indian Angel Network, and we have actually Angels Network is there everywhere. We have Mumbai Angels Network, we have Bangalore Angels Network, Chennai and Delhi Angels Network, and so on. And we have all these, what they do is they are good for small ticket loans, small ticket investments, but they don't put too many we can't gather a lot of investment. And also some of the another flip side of these angel investors, even though they can easily come in, their evaluation matrices will be not such intense, but you will have too many of these investors required if you are looking at sizable money. Usually I've seen that, they operate in lakhs of rupees and very few operate in crores of rupees. Then you have the impact investors who actually are looking at impact businesses or social enterprises. They look at social enterprises with a more benevolent lens, but they do have expectations of higher returns. But they not only have financial return expectations, they also have social return expectations. So in that sense, they are asking everybody to do two things with the same money what is being given. Whereas if you look at the private equity investors, they are very clear in their expectations setting. They want higher returns. Their financial returns is the single goal they will do. But they will come and enhance the value of the enterprise. They will come at higher valuation and expect higher valuation returns. So this enables enterprises which are on the growth path to grow faster with the private equity or venture capital. Impact funds, yes, you can do from the impact investors, you can grow, but you will not be able to grow as fast as in the private equity investors or venture capital, because they can pump in large amounts of capital, which is commercial in nature. But so those are the differences between investors. I think the entrepreneurs need to understand this before getting into what they are. Before taking money from any one of these investors, that's very clear. So other type is grants. Grants are very hard to come, but there are certain activities which grants would be very supportive. In fact, my own company was also a beneficiary of a lot of grants from World Bank and some philanthropic foundations. Those are very important in the early stages of the enterprise's life, because initially the revenues will not be that much for the enterprise to sustain all its costs, but they will have the cost to incur before the revenues will become bigger than the cost, I think. And those are the time grants are required. Grants are required for various purposes, whether research development or expanding into this thing, or building capacity of the institution and so on. Typical sources is you will have, I'm sure you all understand, the governments is one big funder, which is difficult to get, but yeah, private foundations are there, philanthropic institutions, development institutions do have it. So yeah, but again, getting such grants would be a lot of time consuming, particularly going through that grant application process is time consuming one. They'll ask thousands of questions and one needs to go behind that. And sometimes there are chances most of these grants do dictate how and what needs to be done. I'll give you one example. One of the donors which I had experienced was, they were very good. They're very, very supportive donor, but their requirement was they come in and support institutions with, let's say, institutions which are kind of not there yet into the growth path. They will help them to increase their manpower in terms of getting this big ticket resources like maybe CFOs, CIOs, CTOs, CMOs, and things like that, and then pay them for their salaries for the first couple of years or 2 years. Yes, the grant was, they provide grant for that. But thing is, look at what happens. It is very beneficial for those institutions which they know what they're doing. But if they are actually bringing in a top management team with high qualified individuals, this team sometimes might not settle down well, and then in fact they might do damage the institution growth itself. So one needs to be cognizant, and it's neither good or bad. With all good intentions of everybody, sometimes they might land up doing. They might actually end up harming the institution sometimes. So one needs to be cognizant and make best use of this. The donors, that's the problem. Sometimes they dictate whether you like it or not, what one needs to be done. That's the problem with grants. So debt is another instrument which is very good. If you look at most sources of debt, or either governments do provide debt. We have government banks, we have private banks, and then you have non-banking finance companies, and you have informal. Each one has its own advantages and merits and demerits here. The more you go to the banking sector, I think you will find them, they are slightly, the flexibility comes down, because they're all standardized formats which they have for the kind of funding they make. And the turnaround time, the time taken is very long. And their evaluation processes are very long. And most of the banks require collaterals, guarantees, to actually lend money. Yes, pricing would be low, definitely, with the banks compared to the NBFCs. NBFCs are fabulous instruments, which are dedicatedly focused on lending and providing credit to the businesses or individuals. They will be a lot more flexible. They can move a little bit more faster. But the flip side is they might be slightly expensive. There's a slight price which you need to pay for being quicker and faster than the banking system. So these are different kind of players, and which has advantages. Most institutions do take money from all kind of things, whether it is social or commercial enterprises. As a social enterprise, I have borrowed from banks, private sector banks, foreign banks, NBFCs, not much in informal lenders, because we could manage to convince the banks to actually lend us money. But we have another set of lenders, is institutional lenders from international sources, which will come at higher ticket sizes, which might not be suitable for smaller enterprises. There's last instrument, which is also there. We can issue debentures and this thing like that by listing in the stock exchanges. But that's, again, unless the ticket sizes are bigger, like not less than 30, 40 or 50 crores, I think the cost of raising such money would be very expensive. This is one which I found on my LinkedIn. So I thought I should present it to you all. Maybe I'll let you take a minute to read this, so that it's a very interesting one. Is it visible for all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I can read it, but I think it'll be nice if one reads it themselves.
Shall I, sir?
No, I'm just waiting for you all to read for a minute. That's all. Don't worry.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you the 30, 40 seconds to read it. It's an interesting conversation. Look at the most of them. This is what exactly happens to any entrepreneur. I have faced the same thing. You go to the banker and they'll say, okay, if you're just starting a company, they said, okay, why do you need 3 years of balance sheet before you can apply for a loan? Come back after 3 years. So now the question is, how do you survive for 3 years? Okay, you go back after 3 years. They say that, hey, you need to have collaterals also. Otherwise, where is the guarantee? Where is the collateral? What is the immovable properties you can pledge to give a loan? If an enterprise had all those things, and how do they? Why will they go on to the bank? First thing is, then they will ask you, what is the purpose of the money? Then we say that we are growing, investing into the businesses so that we can grow much faster. They say no. We can't lend money to for you to invest in business, or grow your burn cash to actually run the business. You need to raise venture capital and then come back. So banks tend to actually kind of keep on pushing away the people who want money even in need. Most of the time, banks lend money when you don't need the money. I can privately talk to you about when and how I've got a lot of money from the banks when I don't needed them. But when you really need it, that's a bad time to go to the bankers. Unfortunately, even though the bankers are there to be supporting when you need them, but they only fund you when you don't need that funds. So bankers are always a favorite of friends. But that's the problem with debt. Most social enterprises face this exactly same problem. So just fast forwarding from there to the experiences, I want to just take you all for a few minutes about what we do at Yunus Social Business Fund Bangalore. YSP is a non-banking finance company set up dedicatedly for supporting social enterprises and social businesses, more particularly social businesses. Now I'll probably tell you what is the difference between a social enterprise and a social business, because we focus on social business itself. So what we do is, as social businesses, we want to access the power of social business to end poverty. These are the statements which are actually made by Dr. Yunus himself. A social business is a company which is focused at solving social problems, which can be in education, healthcare, water, energy, climate change, and so on and forth. So main mission of the social businesses is to is similar to like a charity, like which wants to do development and help people to actually enhance their income and lead a better quality of life. But it has to be run on business principles where efficiencies and sustainability are the key focus areas. So this is a double KPA here for these social businesses. All the profits which these social businesses make will be reinvested into strengthening the social mission of the social business. So this all started by this ideology is been coming from Dr. Yunus, that's why we carry our name Yunus Social Business. It is named after him. In fact, social businesses, as he defines, you might have read this book, A World of Zeros. I know Dr. Nisha has read it already, so but maybe others, if they're not, please do take some time and read this book. In there, he defines two kinds of social businesses, which I would like to spend a few minutes on to define social business. One is in social business is a business, but it is a business which is solving a social problem. Unlike a social enterprise can be a charitable institution or a business itself. So it can be both. But when we say social business, it is definitely a business. It is working like any other business, but with a mission of a charity, or which a mission to solve social problems. Here we have two kinds of social businesses. Type 1 is where it is going to be a business which is a non-loss making company. It's a non-dividend paying company owned by investors, where the investors do not get back any financial returns, but they do what they get is only the social returns. The profits which such companies make are deployed back into the same business to either grow the business further and reach out to more and more people, or maybe pivot from that business and start a new social business, or start solving a new social problem. The investors here over a period of time can take back their investments, what they have made, but nothing more than that. When I say that, what do we mean by that is, if they've invested, let's say, $10,000, they can take back $10,000 after once the business is capable of giving it back, but they will not get anything more than $10,000, which is the original investment what they have made. So here the business will be able to grow, continue to grow, and serve more and more people. Then we have a type 2 business, which is a for-profit making company, which is owned by the poor themselves, where the profits made is put to their own benefits. All the poor will be benefited from this. We have a couple of social businesses like this, where the businesses are, the shareholders of the businesses are actually the poor beneficiaries of the business itself. So this is where it helps in removing poverty, or it helps in building a enterprise which is going to be one is doing business in the regular marketplace, at the same time solving the property. Yeah, farmer producer companies are a fabulous example of type 2 social business. So YSB works across many countries, works in Brazil, Colombia, Europe, and which is based, headquarters is in Germany, India, Uganda, Kenya, and we do have many other affiliate countries also. What we do as well, so in a social business is we do two things. One is we provide patient financing to the social businesses. That means we provide either debt or equity to social businesses, and we also provide handholding support to so that they stay true to the mission, and also to help them grow um, with their mission. Uh, so yeah, we usually focus on the early stage businesses, not the seed stage businesses. We want them to be have actually graduated from the seed stage, because we want to know that their business models are sustainable. So we usually provide loans between 1 to 3 crore rupees, which is not provide, which is like lower than probably the banks or the private equity you can provide, and much higher than what the MFIs and NBFCs do provide for these enterprises. Um, what we look at when we are looking at providing before finding funds is, for us, the entrepreneur and his team is very, very crucial, and they need to have a proven social impact. I mean, that's what we focus on, because we are social business. We are looking at the problem which they're solving, and that becomes a very critical parameter for us to measure. These are not in any kind of order. We can't really say which is more and which is less. All of them are equally important. Uh, and they need to have a proper business model too. It's not just that they have a fabulous team and they're trying to solve a problem. They need to have a solid business model, and they need to have the ability to grow and then really make a good impact. For the post-investment support, we do a whole lot of activities. We do coaching one-on-one. We provide a lot of handholding support in terms of their HR or technology which they want to bring in. We access markets, make connections to them so that um, they can forge a lot of partnerships and so on. And we do have a large Grameen network, which we provide them connections to all of them, so that across the globe, because YSB works along with the Grameen family, which Dr. Yunus has built in. There's millions of followers, and then a lot of entrepreneurs and are there across the globe, with a lot of technologists are there, a lot of academicians are there, who kind of provide support to the social enterprises whenever required. So this is the kind of post-investment support we do. Fine. So what's the right way to fund social enterprises? Is YSB is the right model for them, or is it the commercial models which we talked about earlier? Is the funding is required? So what I would like to talk about for a minute here before moving forward is, if we look at equity, most of the equity investors look at the growth and valuation of the companies. That becomes very critical. It needs to be a sustainable model. I mean, there should be clear return on equities and investment. I mean, there needs to be what is the profits which they are making will become very critical. Most social enterprises need to make sure, if they have to access equity from an equity investors, they need to be ensure they need to have good growth story for them, and they need to know what is the kind of value which they're adding to the customers. More particularly, social enterprises need to really talk about the customer value proposition, what they have. How is that they're making a difference to the customers which they are serving, and their ability to actually grow and have significant market share will become. One other thing which the social entrepreneur need to be aware of is that their ownership rights will get diluted once you start getting equity. That's a critical point. So the entrepreneur needs to be kind of ready in his mind. I don't know. Okay, I will no longer be the sole controller of this business. There will be somebody else partners with me. That's very important things. Debt is another instrument, but for the debt, for the social enterprises to get debt, there are a couple of key things which they need to look. One major thing which all the debt providers look at is the debt service ratio, or sometimes they do use debt equity ratios, the profitabilities. They need to be profitable, first of all. If you need to buy, you need to access debt. Without being profitable, no lender will lend money. That's why I earlier said bankers will come in when everything is good with the company, and not when things are little things need help. Um, so they need to have a solid bank record, proper documents, like, proving that they are profitable over the years has become very important if you have to ask debt from bankers. Um, Debt is slightly rigid in nature because it has a fixed cash flows which will come in. So the enterprise need to have the ability to service those obligations because it is a very structured funding. Um, Grants are one can keep an eye on grants if they have a good impact story and they need some grant money or seed money to actually support to develop a product or a service or a prototype to be built up, which they can do the market, or they want to do a study to actually prove that it is required. All those non business kind of a cost which they might have, they can actually look at grants. There's a lot of grants available, which they can reach out to grant providers, whether it's the governments or the development institutions and so on. So some examples I just wanted to, so that you will get a feel of what I'm talking about so far. We have a portfolio company called SMB Green, which is based out of Varanasi. They actually have these electric rickshaws. You'll see all these beautiful rickshaws with women are driving, and they are actually not posing for the photographs. They are actually owners of those e-rickshaws, and they are actually drivers of that. And they do carry passengers. They do carry goods using these e-rickshaws. So this company, SMB Green, enables these women to become owners and run this as an enterprise so that they can earn their livelihood. So rickshaw becomes their primary productive asset. So they have Upaya Social Ventures as their equity investors. YSB is the long-term debt provider. So we have provided them a debt for about a tenure of about 5 years with 2 years of principal moratorium period, and a lot of other support which we provide in terms of hand-holding, working with them, working to help them business plan, making connects to all different lenders, because they need a lot more lenders to the MFIs or NBFCs or banks to lend to these women so that they can become owners of these rickshaws. And during the COVID time, in fact, YSB was able to provide them because in COVID time, what happened was they could not make any sales, and like a lot of these drivers could not. The initial lockdown period, they could not go out at all. They had loss of wages, loss of revenue, and everything. But YSB could provide them some support in terms of subsistence allowance for groceries and safety kits and things like that, so they can kind of sustain themselves for some time. So apart from this, these people have got a grant. I want to focus your attention on the kind of grant they got from Shell Foundation. These are all e-rickshaws, right? These are standard e-rickshaws which has lead acid batteries, because otherwise the cost of lithium-ion batteries will go very high. So, but Shell Foundation gave some grants to help actually transition these e-rickshaws from lead acid batteries to lithium-ion batteries. The problem with lithium, how do you charge, and how does one maintain that? So there was a lot of experiments and R&D which had to be done to actually make sure they set up charging stations here and there so that the rickshaws can go and charge themselves. Those are costs which this enterprise as SME Green could not have taken it on itself. That is where the grant became very handy to provide them support. So at any social enterprises, you'll see that they will require all these three components of funding coming in to sustain themselves. So another example is Ignis Careers, which is again a portfolio company of us. They have equity from Acumen, Grey Matters Capital, and so on. YSB is the debt provider again here, and they also have some grants which they come in from HD Parak, United Way, and so on. Here, the focus grant and capital we have talked about. The grant where it's equity and debt we have already talked about how it will help. Equity helps, like I said, it helps build the risk reserves for the company. Debt comes in as a working capital needs. But YSB fund acts as a quasi equity. That means it is so long term that they don't have to repay. It is as good as equity, but it has the features of debt. It has features of both equity and debt because it acts like a risk capital. It is long-term in nature, like equity, but it just liquidates itself as a debt. Whereas equity, now if they have to exit, I think these companies will be starting looking at exiting to some other investor who will come at a valuation. And that means the whole valuation discussion will actually sometimes might have the ability to derail the mission of the organization. But anyway, that's a long shot. But the grant which is coming in is very important. See, the Ignis Careers works with affordable private schools where to help that they train the teachers so that they can teach English and life skills to the children there in the affordable private schools. But there are certain schools which are remotely located or which are much poorer than the affordable private schools. That is where these grants from these STPRI Foundation United Way is helping to reach those people who are unreached. Otherwise, as a business model, they will not be able to reach. So that's what the example of the grant is. Apart from this, we have come up with hybrid models. I mean, all these silo ones like an equity, debt, and grant, and is all complicated. I think that one enterprise has to go behind so many people to actually go to get each one of them. It's like a la carte on the menu. But there are some I know fixed menus which one can actually think about, which will make life easier for the social enterprises in particular, which are called the hybrid model, which takes the best out of equity, which takes the best out of debt, which takes the best out of grant. So if you have heard about this impact bonds or social impact bonds or development impact bonds, this is what it is. Here, if you look at, you have all kind of player there. You have an investor who can provide debt or equity, usually debt, not equity, and you have a service provider who is delivering delivering the services to them, and then you take the outcome payer who provide the grant. Investor is providing a debt, and the outcome payer is providing a grant. So we kind of merge both to actually provide to the service provider who can probably deliver a service based on the way they deliver the service and the targets which they are going to achieve. All the targets are most of the time social targets. Now, and they do sometimes have financial targets, but in the impact bonds, it's only impact bonds will have only the social targets. So if they meet the social targets, the outcome payer will actually subsidize or refund the investor. Initially, the investor is the one who is taking the risk here. Outcome payer is not coming in. Outcome payer comes in later because outcome payer wants to know that for his money, what he is giving away, he wants results. In most of the charity models, what happens is that the donors here, outcome payer is also a donor, by the way. Yeah? The donor now has to put the money and wait for the results to happen. So they don't know many times whether the actual NGO is really delivering the results what they want. But in this model, what happens? This is the risk which is taken by the investor. Investor says, I'll put the money in. I know these people. I will monitor them. I'll make sure this development institution, which is mostly the NGO, will deliver the service. But I want my money back. I don't want to keep them. I mean, I don't have free money to give, but I'm ready to work with them, is what the investors say. But then the outcome payer here comes and says that, okay, if they achieve the results, I'm going to pay. So if the NGO achieves the results, then the outcome payer pays the money. Now he's happy because his social objective was met. Investor is happy because he got his money back. Service provider is happy because he wanted to do the service. He's also happy. So we combine all these together, the debt, equity, and grant model. That's the social impact bond. There's two different nomenclatures that use social impact bonds and development impact bonds. Social impact bonds are usually where the outcome payer is the government, but there are very few examples of that. In fact, recently, I think government of Maharashtra also launched one social impact bonds. So one example of a development impact bond is here for you. I think it was in India. It is in India, which is educate girls. If people, I think some of you might already know this. Here, Educate Girls is an NGO, which is a service provider here. You have UPS Optimus Foundation, which is the investor, which is providing upfront funding for Educate Girls to run their operations, to go and reach out to the girls and train them. And if they achieve the results, which is the goal or the agreed targets, then the Children's Investment Fund Foundation will actually reimburse UBS Optimus Foundation, UBS Optimus Foundation, once the results are which are agreed or are achieved. So you do have evaluators and who actually watch whether this is all done properly, and they are the people who will say yes, they have achieved the target, or no, which is ID Insight and instantly go. So the snapshot here, the project here was like this. It was for 3 years period, 2015 to 18. This Educate Girls was supposed to work with 166 schools in for 140 villages in Rajasthan, reach about 7,300 children. The whole money which they would get, the budget was planned of $270,000. The learning target which they had was to improve learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy skills, which is very simple. It's easy to measure because numeracy skills is easy to measure than other skills. And also for that age group of 3 to 5 children, they had put into analyzed it. They had two groups, like any researchers does. We have a treatment group and a control group. They actually had it to actually know that the results was much better because of that. They also wanted to ensure there is increase in the enrollment of girl children in the classes 2 to 8. So this is what the target they had put for 3 years. In fact, by the end of the 3 years, it's fabulous to see that they had achieved 160% of learning outcomes and 116% in enrollment outcomes. So one last thing, this is, but one thing we need to know, sorry? One thing we need to know here, this is all a development one. This is an NGO kind of an activity where the NGO is the Educate Girls, which is doing the service. So, but what happens for a social business, which we are talking about? Social business or an enterprise which is running on a social business on a sustainable principles. They're not NGO where some outcome pair is just giving you the money and then going up. So we had YSB had done a similar model, which is dedicated towards a social business, which is a kind of a for-profit enterprise, but still solving a social problem. In this case, again, the UBS Optimus Foundation was the funder here, who funded about $500,000 financing Impact Water. Impact Water is a company in Uganda, which is actually establishing water treatment, water purifiers in the schools for children to access clean drinking water. And then once they reach so many number of 3,000, once they reach about so many number of schools, which was agreed target between them, the outcome pair, which is Rockefeller Foundation, which actually pay the investor. Here, the difference here is UBS, the Impact Water was actually borrowing money from Invest Water. And Impact Water is actually not giving a free grant to the school where they set up this water purifier. In fact, the school pays for the cost of these water purifier. These are not small water purifiers like homes. These are like the big water purifiers which we have at a village level or a community level. So the school pays for it, and in fact, the school recovers some part of these cost of this investment from the school's fees which they charge. So the children get good drinking water here, but it is run on a sustainable basis. So only difference is to make that upfront investment, Impact Water does not have the investment required. That's where the UBS Optimus Foundation came in and gave a loan. But UBS now requires interest to be paid on the loans which they gave, which makes the whole product more expensive. That is where the outcome pair, Rockefeller, came in and said, okay, everything is done on a sustainable model. Rockefeller will now take away the additional cost which is coming in the form of interest interest on the loan. So they take the burden, provided Impact Water reaches to so many number of schools and reaches all the agreed targets. So this ensures there is a sustainable financial model there. Um, So that's pretty much what I had to talk about the financing social enterprises and what we do as Yunus Social Business. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions now.
वो रहता है रिव्यू वाला लिस्ट, वो सबका लेकर आना, और जो डेजर्टेशन वाले मार्क्स का फॉर्मेट उनके पास दिया है वो लेकर आना, और उनका जो रिम्यूनरेशन वाला फॉर्मेट है वो भी लेकर आना.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Can we go down to the initial slide whereby you have shown that social enterprises are in between? Yeah, this slide.
Yes.
Sir, can you explain this concept a little bit more? Actually, like this gradual distinction between charity, like on one end of the spectrum.
Background noise, which I'm little finding it difficult to hear. If people who are not speaking, if they can put their mics on mute, it'll be good.
Sir, now is it okay?
Yeah.
Sir, can you just explain this concept? Actually, like on one end of the spectrum, there is charities. On one end, there is traditional business, and social enterprises are in between. And there is this gradual distinction between all these phases, sir.
Okay, you need to see this slide as like this, right? There is no black and white in the whole world, right? Everything is shades of gray. There is nothing called pure 100% for profit or 100%. I mean, you might have 100% for profit business, 100% charitable business. Sometimes there will be a mixed match of different shades. You know? Some people might say, I do 80% profit and 20% not for profit. Then you can't really put them in any one bucket. Hence, there is a differences. Some of them, like if you look at in Europe and US, I think there are different kind of laws in different countries which actually enable us to have business activities in a social business where that will be generating some amount of profit, and they are not dependent on grant for everything. So maybe they're dependent on grant about 80% and 20% they generated their own revenue. In some businesses, they generated full revenue, but they are still charitable. So there is a mixed match of all these enterprises across. The picture which I'm trying to depict here is basically is to kind of give you a visual, this thing that there are different shades of social enterprises or different levels of charity or for profits which will be there. So hence, there are in the end of the spectrum, you have 100% for profit making businesses. The one end is the 100% charitable enterprise. In between, you have different degrees of these combination of these things. That is what we meant to say.
Sir, my only one of my just small suggestion is like social enterprises, since it's a multidisciplinary field, and recently we had a session with Professor Madhukar Shukla sir from XLRI, and sir has given us some typology. And now, since there are different types of social enterprises, in fact, Professor sir from MDIS, sir was saying that even the corporate social enterprise is also a concept like Tatas and Birlas. Now, social enterprise circle could be bigger, like in this. I'm just asking for the conceptual purpose in this. Can the social enterprise circle be a little bit bigger, and it can have an overlapping circles with some part of traditional business also, or some part of charities, NGOs, trusts?
Possible. Yeah, it's possible. There is nothing hard and fast here, right? I mean, it's just if you look at it from ideological perspective, social enterprise, I mean, sometimes you look at enterprise means, let's take, for example, let's take a look at the social impact bonds or development impact bonds. We are talking about it as a bond, which is a financial terminology, and we are talking about social impact or development impact. Here, but we are giving charity there. If you look at the whole model I just earlier explained, they are actually giving away grant, but on achieving the results. That's what they're doing. That's not an enterprise per se, it's charity. But they do call it as sometimes an enterprise. That's why probably for this middle one, we need to put that as social business. if given it, I mean, if I can define it, I would put it as a social business, which is kind of has the both of best one, which is what Dr. Yunus is talking about. That's what he's trying to differentiate between social enterprise and social business, whereas your Tata Trust can be a social.
If I can add here, if you allow,
Yes, ma'am.
Sunilji, see, in all literature, still researchers are looking for the right definition, and we have already studied this since last 4 days. Another thing is, many places it has defined as a hybrid model.
Yeah.
Right. Another you will see that it has also defined as extended form of charity, but with some profit margin. So it is an extension of charity with some changes. It is extension of business model with mission. So it's defined with the various ways, as Professor Archana said, it is a contextual.
Hmm.
So that's why this is an emerging field of study. So every scholar and the practitioner, they are defining with the experience. They're defining with their meeting with the stakeholders. So what Madhukar Shukla sir has defined, it was based on his field experience. And he has written very clearly in his book and in the talk, he has defined these 5 categories based on his experience and supported by research. So initially it was defined, it was classified in 3 areas. And he extended to 5 areas.
Mm.
So that's how it is a very much, it's a scholarly, or I would say that is a theoretical approach. But what Suresh is talking about is a thoroughly practical approach, what he has seen in the field.
Yeah, I think the
Over to you, sir.
theoretical models, I think you all as academicians need to provide clarity. If I'll tell you, one of the problems we had when we were talking about the CSR law, when it was passed in 2013 with the New Companies Act, we were asking them to include social businesses to be funded by the CSR funding, because it does have, it does not have a profit motive, but it has a sustainability motive. Initially they said yes, but later on they dropped that whole thing off. Now they kind of, the fascination to social enterprises, the terminology is so much that we fail to differentiate. And now the social stock exchange, if you have seen the literature and the way the draft it was made, it all talks about charity. It is giving and giving and giving. Just giving away is charity. Giving is charity activity. It is not an enterprise. Enterprise, according to us, might be, should actually recover its own cost. Then it will be sustainable. Otherwise, the charity activity will not be sustainable. That's why probably we need a new terminology called social business, and it requires certain definition. But now, the moment I say social business, my problem in our country at least is the income tax will ignore the term social. They will only use they will catch on to the term business. Business means taxable. The moment you bring in that kind of an angle, then we lose what it needs to be done. So we require a lot more policy changes at different levels. It's not just about writing in a slide like what I have written. I mean, this is okay. I mean, you can just put it just to give a visual feel of it, but it'll definitely, it'll probably not be clear, because each one is going to start defining and depicting in their own way.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Myself, Kaushambi Chaudhary, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
First of all, thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session. Sir, I was just having a confusion regarding the impact debt and impact equity, means how both are, are serving as the most important funding options for the thing.
See, in terms of impact in debt and equity, for both, we have different kinds of investors or funders now who call themselves impact funds or impact debt and impact equity. And you have a pure commercial funds like private equity, venture capital, and so on forth. The only difference is what I see is the expectations of returns on the impact funds will be slightly lower than the normal venture capital or the private equity funds. That is what they all at least quote. Okay. Uh, but if you look at impact funds, which debt which have received from international sources, we have got money at around 13%, 14%, whereas the debt in India, you could have got it around the same price. Second, I'll tell you, it's the same impact debt which we got during this entire COVID time. I've seen in some of the enterprises, it is very fresh in my mind, is they were supposed to have stayed with the enterprise when the enterprise is in some kind of a crisis, right? If you are an impact first or impact oriented fund. Unfortunately, even though they call themselves impact debt funds, when this COVID crisis happened, when the institution was struggling because there was no collections, nobody was doing any business, revenue was stopped. So they actually recalled the loan. They said, you please pay back our money. Because why? The situation is not good. So it's a little tricky to understand. I know when they call them, somebody calls them to impact and impact. The reason for that, if you've heard Dr. Yunus last week, I'm sure he would have actually said the way we have structured ourselves is the cause for it, because impact funds are also structured in the manner, so they are also behaving exactly like commercial ones, even though they want to be impactful, but they are not, because they still have to give back the money to their own investors. The whole structuring is a problem. So, but the intent is to do good. Maybe they'll be slightly concessional in nature compared to the commercial funds. This is all I can tell you about it. I don't know
Okay,
whether I
thank you.
clarified you or confused you.
Yeah, no, sir. It's okay. Sir, clear. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So why it is a little bit of sometimes confusing is this is what is happening in our real world.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's why I gave you both versions of it. How they say they impact, and at the same time they act exactly like the commercial players.
Exactly, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sureshji. You have given a real example, which even I can't I can't do that as academicians. We can theorize something, we can conceptualize something, but in a practical thing, these are very different things. So I hope that all the participants they have enjoyed this lecture, and